Hey everybody, it's Minius, and let's talk Mass Effect. Because you guys have questions, I have questions. Let's get going, but one thing we need to do first. Cue the Mass Effect music. Alright. Start off with David. David wants to know, are you more worried or optimistic about this new Mass Effect game? Also, what are your concerns and hopes? I am somewhere in between worried and optimistic. I know, probably for a fact, that I'm going to enjoy this new Mass Effect game. Mass Effect's kind of my jam. I like space exploration, I like characters, I like aliens, I like living in that world. But the previous entries from BioWare, specifically from Electronic Arts, have been a little bit worrisome. A lot of you have played through Andromeda and know that it was not a fully complete game. Really, the more concerning game that came out, though, was Anthem. Anthem was a lot of weird ideas that weren't properly connected and felt very half-baked. And if they continue along those lines, I'm not sure they're going to be able to produce a quality game. And that quality issue is strictly based off getting the time and resources to fully complete a product. Because, like I said, the last few games have felt somewhat incomplete. We're going to get a couple ideas of what this next game might be like, because this game, I don't believe, is close at all. There's the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which is just a remaster, but there are different qualities of remasters, so we'll see how much time is put into that. More importantly, Dragon Age 4. Is that a complete product? Is it polished? Is it all that together? That'll give you an indication of what this next game might be like from a quality and really resource commitment standpoint. And from that point, I'll be able to answer this question better. I'll get more worried or more optimistic based on that specific game. This is from Bro Vicarian. Could you mention 3 things that have to be in Mass Effect 5 that were already in Andromeda, and 3 that should not be in the game? First, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. Having this game called Mass Effect 5, is it Mass Effect 5? Is it Mass Effect 4? I'm going to go with the next Mass Effect game. It's kind of unclear where that is, because I think Andromeda was more of a spin-off. That being said, this question is still valid because Andromeda was the next move in gameplay and such. So let's try some things. Really, I thought of 2 things that I think have to be in the next Mass Effect game, which is kind of cheating. The rest of them aren't halves. Anyway, let's start here. I really like the movement in Andromeda. The original Mass Effect trilogy is very heavy, and when you're able to jump around with a jump pack or biotic powers, that felt really good. Also, the power options, being able to choose from many powers. I don't know if you should necessarily be able to choose from all of them, but having a wider array of options was something that was really neat. As far as things that shouldn't be in this next game, my number one concern is a forced open world, and what I mean by that is having to transverse and find your next objective, as opposed to being able to just take a shuttle to it and jump right into a mission. Companies are doing this a lot, where they're extending the length of their game by making you wander through open worlds to meet objectives. And while that works for some games, in a plot-heavy game like Mass Effect, that slows the game down to a crawl and really damages the pacing that's important for how the story is told. Pacing is very important in stories. Second, they need to make sure they resolve enough plot lines. That was a huge problem in Andromeda, where they asked all these questions and then didn't answer any of them. And I think that was on purpose. That's something that a lot of game companies and really television show companies are doing, where they'll ask a question and then not resolve it and expect you to come back for the answer later. They need to focus on making a game. Answer some questions, make it whole, make it interesting, and then go on from there. And I was actually able to come up with 3 on the not being in the game. I really don't want the Ket in Andromeda. There's a chance that the Ket will come in and invade the Milky Way, and that'll be connection. I don't think the Ket were interesting villains at all. They may have been more realistic alien villains, but from an interest standpoint, they were just kind of generic beings that they could do better. We'll put it that way. Before I recorded this, I actually started working on a video that kind of covers this in more depth, and that'll come later this month. Rob wants to know my thoughts on the new Mass Effect game being set in the Milky Way. First thought, main thought, I think they had no choice. But whatever you felt of Andromeda, people liked it, people were okay with it, a lot of people didn't like it. The one thing everyone can agree on, though, is that it didn't find the audience it needed, to really continue. And I know people want it to continue, but there was so much negativity surrounding it, whether it was fair or not, that either a fresh start or a return to what worked is what they have to do. The one concern with a fresh start, let's say they go to a new location, that sounds kind of just like Andromeda. So that leaves them the only option of returning to the Milky Way and trying to continue the story in at least one way. Victor and Ashy Giddy ask, what do you think the next Mass Effect will be about? And Ashy went on to say, I would love the game to be about rebuilding the galaxy and reconnecting everyone after the Destroy ending. And that's really my answer to this. We don't actually have a lot of evidence as to what the next game would be about. But what I think it would be about, and really what I would like it to be about, is just that. The galaxy is broken, it just suffered horrible losses in a Reaper war, things are disconnected, people are separated, and you have to navigate your way through a broken galaxy. Now, as far as evidence for that, it's kind of there, but they could really go in a whole lot of different directions. There's so many things they can do that it's impossible to say with any kind of certainty at this point what this next Mass Effect game will be about, other than it has Liara in it. I suppose, though, you can look at evidence for a Destroy ending. That looks very likely, and Danny, Sploosh, Miguel, and Frosty Baby 13 want to know about that. If you're going to continue with the Mass Effect trilogy, which is something that they've asked the community before, and way more people wanted them to continue with something new than go back to a prequel. So if you're going to continue, you need to establish a common backstory. And out of all the endings, I mean, really, Destroy was the one that was most liked. Now, not everybody liked it, but it was the one that was most liked. It's also the one that puts the galaxy in the most uneasy situation, depending on how you look at things. Obviously, there's other options than that, but there is a plot right after that ending. So I think that out of all the options they have, if they want to do a Mass Effect game and they want to continue it after the Mass Effect trilogy, having a canonical Destroy ending is the way to go. I should also add that this by no means undoes your choices in the trilogy. It just chooses the next game to follow a very specific timeline, if they do go with that, which is, of course, what it looks like. Aaron asks, if the Destroy option is canon, then did the Geth survive? If so, could they rebuild the mass relays over time? That is one of the very specific things in the Destroy ending. The Geth did not survive. Now, that doesn't mean in this new game that they won't be around, but that would also mean that the Destroy ending isn't canon. There are also other species and other races capable of rebuilding the mass relays. This is an interesting question going forward. My guess will be that there will be no Geth in this new game, which is kind of a bummer because I like those guys. Obscenity Overload asks, do you think the next game could cater for Mass Effect 3 ending somehow, and that trailer was only the Destroy ending? Yes, it's possible, but I think it's very, very unlikely, and there's one very specific reason for that, and some other things that back that up. The specific reason, though, is that you'd have to make 3 games at once, which would cost maybe not exactly 3 times as much, but a lot more than it normally would. And that's just not a feasible option from a development standpoint. It's much easier to create one piece of content for everyone to go to. And of course, that's going to be a bummer to some people, but I think they don't have a choice in that. The other important thing is that it's been almost 8 years at this point since the previous game. By the time this comes out, it could be more like 12 to 13 years, and they need a solid base for new people to jump in. So having something that fractured at the beginning, a plotline that's that dependent on multiple different entries that new gamers didn't experience, isn't the way to go if you want this game to be as successful as possible. We've chatted a bit about how Destroy looks like the most likely scenario, but here are a couple questions asking other options as far as that goes. Captain Ply asked, how do you think they can clear up the 3 different endings or continue a different storyline? And Ali asks, how are some ways the devs can write around the Mass Effect 3 endings without changing them and have a game set in the Milky Way? Now, these are both things that don't look like they're going to happen, but they are options. The most prevalent one would be to have a long gap in between the end of Mass Effect 3 and the beginning of this new game. Potentially more than 500 years. Because Liara appears to be in it for sure, that limits your length of time. But let's say it's 800 years out. You can use those 800 years to converge the separate endings to come back. The best way to do this would actually be a prequel, but they seem pretty uninterested in doing that. I should also add that I don't think 800 years is enough time to converge these endings for Mass Effect 3. They're too split. And they want to try to piss off as few people as possible. And one way to piss people off for sure is to make all of those endings of Mass Effect 3 irrelevant. They can't really do that. So choosing the canonical ending appears to be their best option, unless they're ridiculously creative and can think of something that nobody's thought of. David, Brian, and me and my 10-2010 want to know about possible new races in the next Mass Effect game, or possibly the reintroduction of unexplored species like the Yogg or Ralloy. First of all, let's chat about those two species that are already there. We know for a fact that there are species that the Reapers left alone. The Yogg are one that's confirmed. Now, the Yogg were about 150 years behind where we are today as humans as a species. So about 200 to 250 years behind the humans in Mass Effect 1, which means they're ready to come out. And as soon as a new species gets their hand on technology, what everyone thought was Prothean technology, for instance, one of the most famous, or one of my favorite descriptive answers in the original Mass Effect is when Captain Anderson says, our technology jumped 200 years when we discovered Prothean tech, which is absolutely true. So there's a big jump, and any one of these races can come out. The Ralloy, though, are a different story. They tried to hide themselves when the Reapers showed up. I doubt they were successful. The one thing we know Reapers like to do is download the data that's available from the Citadel. And since the Ralloy were already there, they'll know they exist, they'll know they're a spaceflight species, and they'll go mess them up. Now, based on the way Mass Effect 3 transpired, they'll still be around, but they won't have successfully evaded the Reaper's grasp. As far as having new races, yes, that's definitely possible. In fact, they should absolutely do that. One thing these new games have done, even Mass Effect 2 and 3, have not introduced that many new races. Obviously, Andromeda really only introduced 2 or 3 races, depending on whether or not you call the Remnant or the Jardan a new species. So you might get only 1 or 2, which allows you to focus. Only the first Mass Effect game tossed in a bunch of different ones. But I think absolutely we will see a species that we haven't seen before. The Zombified Taco asks, do you think any of the races in the next game will be extinct? For example, the Batarians. Even if the Reaper War was won, they pretty much got obliterated, and they did. They got messed up. But extinct is too far. Really, the only race that looks like they're going to be completely punched out of the Milky Way is the Geth, and there are some ways around that. But even if the Batarians get 99.99% of their population wiped out, there's still a sizable group that still exists and can continue in the galaxy. For instance, a species that continued in the galaxy, they got something like 99.99% of their species wiped out, the Drell. They lost their planet and it got devastated, and only a handful of them got picked up and plucked off that world by the Hanar. But they still exist, they're not extinct, and there's enough of them to continue as a species. I think you'll see several species in all kinds of trouble, but they'll exist. Maybe they need help. Maybe that's a plotline. Very Big Sad asks, if the Reapers are destroyed, who's going to be the main antagonist? This might be the #1 question coming into this new game. Certainly, in my opinion, it's got to be one of the most important. There's a real video in here, and maybe I'll go into what are good questions going into the next Mass Effect. But as far as who's going to be the main antagonist, we don't have enough information to ask that. What I would like is one of the already established species to have a main antagonist, get together a coalition, and try to connect all the other worlds in maybe a fascist or dictatorial way that's heavily oppressive that you have to break up. I would love to see a Solarian villain. We've had a Turian villain. I would love to see a main villain be a Asari or something like that. I think that would be fantastic. Now, whether or not that's likely, I'm not sure. There are other options. First of all, there could be a species or coalition or race that comes in from outside the Milky Way. I would prefer that they didn't do this. The other option is there's several billion years of history before the Reapers come into existence. And we know for a fact that some species were able to hide from Reaper extinction. The Leviathans are one example. A small group of Protheans did. That's another example. Maybe there's an ancient species that's down there that's waiting for their opportunity and are going to jump up and take advantage of all the chaos caused by the Reaper War. Austin and Papa Bear Games have another huge question. They want to know, how long after the Mass Effect trilogy will this game be set? We have a range, I guess, but we don't have the particular answer. Since Liara is going to be in that, there's a period she's got about 900 more years in her lifespan, so it's somewhere in there. Now, let's take a look at something that's got a lot of attention and I didn't really give that much thought to, and I'll explain why. This is Liara's supposed age lines in the new trailer. If you zoom in real close on her eyes, you can see that there are, wrinkle marks. I think that's more of an expression thing that's due to higher graphical ability. If you go back and play the Mass Effect trilogy, there are very, very old Asari that have absolutely no aging on them at all. None. They didn't even try. Now, they may not have tried because it didn't look good. I know for a fact there are older humans whose age lines just aren't appealing in that they just don't look realistic. And there is a scene on Ilium, really a kind of audio cutscene ad, where one of the Asari mentions to her Asari friend, asking her if she was using biotics to touch things up. So maybe they age. I'm more inclined to think that Liara, even if it is set way in the future, would not have age lines. So this question remains unanswered. As far as what I think it's more likely that we're talking within 10 or 20 years. I think that's more appealing to BioWare to do something real quick, continue with a lot of the characters they already have established that are popular, and draw people into the game that way. That's not necessarily what I would do. I would space it out a bit, but it is much easier and probably has a broader appeal to do it quickly. Rob, Shadows82, Frosty Baby 13, Archangel Phoenix, and Keshin all want to know about the possibility of Shepard returning as the main playable character. I think this is way more likely than people think. There's a real benefit to Shepard returning, and that's getting your average Mass Effect player excited to come back and play this game. It's an established character, it's known, people like Shepard quite a bit, and dropping Shepard in this game as the protagonist will generate excitement that a new character just can't bring, just for the fact they're new and unknown. Now, there are detractions to this. First of all, Shepard has had a complete story. Do we really need more Shepard? I personally don't, but I can see the popularity of that character returning. As far as what I would do, I would go with somebody brand new. It gives you a broader brush to paint what you want as the story of this game. It's something that has a lot more options to it, but I can't see that option being more appealing to the general public, and I think BioWare and Electronic Arts are thinking along those lines and are going to go to a safer play as opposed to someone brand new. How about being able to choose other races as your playable character? Aitsuki, Jesse, and Aiko want to know about this. And this might be the most requested aspect of a new Mass Effect game. It's something they haven't done. It's something that's very, very appealing to a lot of people. Not everybody wants to play as a human. I think if they do manage to do this, people will really like it. There is one major detractor to this, and that's that it would cost a lot more. Many characters sound very, very different depending on what race they are. If we want to use Dragon Age Inquisition as an option, because that was one where you could choose multiple different races and they were all fully voiced, you could go with an English or an American accent, male and female. That's 4 people you have to pay to do a whole bunch of lines, and it works with all the species. If you were to do that in Mass Effect, really, it only would work with humans and Asari. You could maybe toss in Turians there and add a weird voice effect for everything. Krogans sound different, Solarians sound different. Drell, maybe if you add a voice modulator, could do it. it's difficult from a financial standpoint. How many more complete lines would you need to record to match enough species to make everybody satisfied? You get 4 in Dragon Age Inquisition, but maybe 8 in this? That's just a lot. It's too much to expect EA to back that. So for the main game, I think you'll have to play as just a human. I know that other options would be great, but that's what I think. Now, adding a separate, smaller mode, maybe in multiplayer, maybe in an expansion where you have a choice and go on a side story, I think they should absolutely give that a try. People would have a total blast with it. On a related question, me and my 102010 asks, if the next Mass Effect game lets you choose another race as your character, what race would you choose? My answer is boring, and people won't like it, but I will explain it. I always, if I have an option, play as a human. And there are some people that really bothers them. They want to do something different. But I always like playing as myself. In a full role-playing manner, I am a human male, so I like playing as a human male in different scenarios. I'll just picture myself as that main character, making all the choices, and get my kicks from a fantasy that way. I don't really connect myself to other species, but I like being a human exploring an area that has a bunch of different species to interact with. Something that you can't do on Earth. Something, for instance, making humans the underdog, because we are absolutely not underdogs on Earth. We are the top dogs. If I had to choose another character, I think it would be a lot of fun to play as a Krogan. It fits into my rage, I guess. I like smashing things. I like the way they laugh. That's probably my choice if I had a different one. Pedro and Ashy Kitty would like to know about Liara as a possible protagonist. She is, after all, the only character that seems to be confirmed for this new game, and that would totally work. There is one thing that detracts from that, is that Liara is an established character, and Mass Effect is usually about you controlling your character's backstory, controlling your character's actions. Liara would act in a very, very specific way that is already established. Would I be totally okay with Liara being the main protagonist? Absolutely. I think it could work. But I do not think they will go in that direction. Jared wants to know, when you're doing party member quests, what are your thoughts on actually getting to take control of that character for that quest line? Meaning the character that isn't your normal main character, and then having that main character becoming a party member. This is a preference thing. As I've mentioned in the last couple questions, I always like playing as myself, and always playing as myself. So I am not a huge fan of switching out characters, especially when it comes to dialogue. It does give you more control over the entire story, and if they go in that direction, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. I think there are people who would really like it. But from a personal preference standpoint, I always like just controlling one character and having that character be a badass. Mike Gamble, who is the project director of this next game, did hint at ties to Andromeda, and Wolfbound or Wolf, Brian, Dave, Dusan, Alexander, and Andre all asked questions about that connection, and all their questions kind of bleed together, so let's chat for a while about that. First of all, Andromeda is already connected to the trilogy and the future. The beginning of Andromeda, the characters in Andromeda all do stuff before Mass Effect 3 starts. And Liara is fully aware of the Andromeda initiative, gives them some support, and is going to be in this new game. So already, without doing anything, they are connected. Liara can easily just throw away a couple lines saying, "These guys got away, I hope they're okay," and right from that point, it's connected. Also, all the technology that they have in Andromeda already exists in the Milky Way. The jump pack, the time capsules, all the new technology is there, so you could easily just plug them into the new game. That makes them connected. Now, how tied can these new games be? I know a lot of people are looking for a continuation of Andromeda. Even Dusan asked, is Mass Effect 5 going to be Andromeda proper? The answer to that is almost certainly no. There are some huge timeline issues with making this work. First of all, it took several hundred years just to get to Andromeda. If it takes 500, 600 years to get to Andromeda, it will take, at the least, another 500, 600 years to get back, which is over 1,000 years, and Liara, her lifespan would be over. I suppose there is a chance that once those characters get into Andromeda, they build their own enormous mass relay. But that would be kind of ridiculous. That's way more powerful technology than even the Reapers had, and you don't want to force something like that. So having your writer main character from Andromeda or any of the characters there freeze themselves and come back doesn't match up with the timeline unless you start doing some really, really weird stuff like freezing Liara, putting her in stasis, and then having her wake up. That is possible. The less confusing this new game is, the better. Also, from the standpoint of continuing Andromeda, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I don't think that's a good idea from a popularity standpoint. While it's something, and like we mentioned, Andromeda didn't answer any of their questions, and I'm sure we'd like their questions answered, they don't fit in with this new game, and they need to try something new. Now, if we look at what actually is in the trailer, there is a hint of things that are directly connected, and they can add stuff that was missing from Andromeda in here, specifically the Quarian arc. Alexander talks about this, and this is exactly what I was thinking when they said that. In the trailer, they mention the 6 arc is away. I thought there were only 5 arcs, but if you count the Nexus, there are 6, and that Quarian arc never makes it to Andromeda, so it could very easily have started on the trip to Andromeda, broken down, and gotten stuck somewhere in this gigantic galaxy, maybe in a nebula cloud, somewhere else that the Reapers couldn't discover and destroy, and one of your missions is you come across this arc that has Quarians. It's really Quarians and a bunch of other aliens, and that could be a mission, and that could be your connection to Andromeda. As far as the biggest connection to Andromeda, I think that one specifically is the most likely. I don't think you'll see any Andromeda characters in this, other than maybe a mention, or maybe a lost audio clip. Maybe they'll answer some stuff that way. Keep in mind that Mass Effect Andromeda actually starts about 600 years after Mass Effect goes. So if this game takes place 10 to 20 years after Mass Effect 3, Mass Effect Andromeda will have not started. Rand Phoenix asks, do you think the new Mass Effect will be a one-off or a 3-parter? This is a good question. They should plan on making more games. There's no way they don't. It doesn't make sense to do work at this point in video games that doesn't continue, because it's a way to make more money while doing less effort if you establish a franchise. They're still running this Mass Effect franchise. However, I think they just need to make one very good game, and then go from there if it works for them. NanoG asks, what do you think the new Mass Effect would need to have to make it perfect or really good from the eyes of the old school players, that is, those who love the original trilogy? We'll start by saying I think we should try to drop the idea of getting a perfect Mass Effect game. There are just too many people for everyone to think it is perfect. And one thing I've noticed while running this channel is that people like Mass Effect for very, very different reasons, even those people who like the trilogy. So finding something to please everybody might be impossible. Really good would be interesting. As far as looking what the old school players might like, the most important parts of Mass Effect, to the most people, have always been the story, the world-building elements, and the characters. And those are ridiculously obvious answers, but if they nail those, they'll be allowed to do other things with the gameplay that would work and allow those old school players to love this new game. I should also add that this is not easy in the slightest. I think the original Mass Effect game has the best video game story of all time. It's exceptional. How do you match that? Is it even possible? That's something that's going to be extremely difficult to do, but that's what they need to try to do to make the old school players love or think this game is perfect or really good. Marco asks, can someone explain to me what the F is that Alderson disc looking thing? Liam asks, who could have built the system-sized ring shown soon after the beginning of the trailer? I've got it freezed on the screen. I think we need to be careful with reading too much into this. One thing I remember from covering the old Andromeda trailers is they'd have a lot of eye candy, and then it wasn't a big deal in the actual game. This, though, could be. What I think it looks like is what scientists think planets look like when they formed. A big ring of dust that slowly coalesces into a planet. That is the most likely scenario in my point. I also think that as cool as this looks, the most you'll get out of something like that is exactly what we got in the trailer. A ship passing through the system like that. It's amazing eye candy. It looks beautiful. Now, it could be something more important. It'd be amazing if that was a huge plot point and you're looking at old ancient technology built from a race that's going to come back, and that's it, and they show it there. They haven't actually done anything like that in the past. Andrew asks, are sci-fi writers or social justice warrior writers creating the game? That is the real question. Andrew, the correct answer is probably both. They're not separate. What you look at with sci-fi writers is people who write a world that they'd like to see, or write a world where they think the direction of the universe is going in. And that's their opinion. And you should also keep in mind that in all of, artistic creation, artists are generally a lot more liberal than the general population. So you're going to get this kind of stuff, and we are getting this kind of stuff everywhere. If this stuff bothers you, I don't know what I can do for you. I think the best fiction is its own thing, and then allow you to read into it to whatever degree you want to. Riacon asks, how's your faith in BioWare? This connection is really, how's my faith in BioWare and how's my faith in Electronic Arts properly funding BioWare? That's the core problem, and that's where I have the most issue. I've gone over this a little bit at the beginning of the video, but BioWare needs to be properly funded to make stuff, and that is true with every single studio. Now here's a counterpoint from a business standpoint. BioWare stuff hasn't necessarily made a ton of money. It's a chicken and egg thing. Is that due to the fact that EA is changing their games and not giving them enough to make the vision they want? Or is it the fact that those single-player driving games don't make enough money to justify the investment? I am not sure with that. One thing I do know is that the best products generally have huge backing, and Electronic Arts does not have a great record with that recently, except for maybe one of the most recent games, which might be a good sign, Star Wars Jedi. Very solid game. Hopefully, we'll see more of that, and we will get this question answered, whether or not any faith in BioWare is justified. And from there, questions get more accelerated. 88 Somi says, what does BioWare need to do to not F this thing up again? And he used more letters than I did. Savage Historian asks, are they aware they best not F this up? I'm sure they know this. Mike Gamble is trying to convince people that they're bringing in people from the original trilogy that left to make this work, but there is no way to prove that they've done this without actually doing it. They know that. I think everyone knows that. At this point, all you can do is wait and see. Let's get more aggressive, because people are, and this is something BioWare is going to have to deal with, and it's something that is very difficult to deal with. Matthew, he says, is BioWare even worth salvaging at this point? And then makes a highly contentious point that he admits to. The last good game they made was Dragon Age Origins, released on November 3rd, 2009. And he's concerned about what he calls the EA-ification of them over the last decade. A couple points here. First of all, I don't know how many people would agree with you. I think you admit that they found more fame with Mass Effect 2. I think that's the best game they've made. It's different than the old school Baldur's Gate, Knights of the Old Republic type games they made. And yes, you could call the more action style of game an influence from EA, but something I think that should be very clear with these new games. You can make an excellent RPG while making an excellent action game. There is enough horsepower in these new systems, in the new PCs, in the new hardware to make that both work, and people have done it. They don't need to be separate. You can do both. Yes, it is extremely difficult, but you can do both. Now to your first and main question, is BioWare even worth salvaging at this point? I think you have to consider BioWare as something different than they were. All companies have to evolve, and at this point, the situation that BioWare is in, being owned by a company that is more focused on making money than making super excellent art, and in all fairness to Electronic Arts, all companies are like that, really. They're trying to sell stuff, they're trying to make money. They wouldn't be companies if they didn't. They wouldn't have the money to fund these projects if they didn't have that attitude. They should look at just making BioWare what they think it needs to be to do things for them. Will BioWare be what you want it to be? It doesn't sound like it. I think if you want to play their games going forward, you'll just have to accept the new BioWare games what they are and try to add a mix of the old school BioWare, the storytelling, the RPG elements, with the new action elements that they seem to be going with. Who knows if you liked it or not? Doesn't sound like it, but I think it can work. But yes, it's going to be very, very difficult. Grandmaster Chris asks, with Casey Hudson gone, do you think BioWare will be able to maintain what made the series special? Casey Hudson, the director of all those games, very important figure in Mass Effect. I don't think he's necessary to make Mass Effect continue. It'll be a little bit different. I don't consider, and this is not something I have inside information on, I don't consider Casey Hudson the most important person in the creation of Mass Effect. I always go to Drew Karpyshyn, and he's been gone for a while, since the middle of Mass Effect 2. So, will they be able to maintain what made this series special? That'll be the goal. I think it's possible. Is it better off with Casey Hudson gone? Probably not. Scott asks, what are you hoping that BioWare will change about their marketing strategy to advertise the Legendary Edition and the next Mass Effect game? At this point, the most important thing is to repair their reputation, and the only way to do that is to just make a good game. The actual marketing strategy will have to come later. I don't necessarily think marketing was their issue. There was a negative connotation of, I guess, not only Andromeda, but Anthem, but that was backed up to varying degrees based upon the quality of those games. And at this point, the focus, don't worry about the marketing, make a good game. Make a good as game as possible, and that'll salvage your reputation about as good as anything else they can do. This one's from David. If they mess up the next game by not giving it the development time they need, do you think that would be the end of Mass Effect? Simple answer on this one, no. It'll be bad. It'll be very bad, but not the end. Electronic Arts paid a ton of money for BioWare, and really what they were paying a ton of money for, because they would had a limited time. When all these companies buy out a smaller company, they have a limited time with the talent that made that good. What they're buying is the intellectual properties. Mass Effect, Dragon Age, that kind of stuff. If this game doesn't work out, you'll probably see the series go on hiatus for 15 years, 20 years. It will return, just like every other property in Hollywood and games and anything that has value, because it's much, much easier to make something from a financial standpoint that already has brand recognition. And Mass Effect will be in the minds of people for years to come, even if it's not for the right reasons. It's actually been proven that even a brand with negative value has more value in the future than a brand new brand, because people will remember something but not remember what they thought about it. That's been proven. I think that's weird, but it's still true. King Kaiser asks, with Anthem, a remaster, plus a new Mass Effect and Dragon Age in production all at once, do you think BioWare has the staff to handle this entire workload, or should we be worried about the quality of all these games? That's a tough one. I do know for a fact that there is a separate team working on Anthem that's in Austin, not Edmonton, and the way I think they're going to handle this is they're going to finish the Mass Effect remaster, then move the majority of their staff to Dragon Age. Then once that's done, move the majority of their staff to Mass Effect. So they're going to handle these one at a time, which makes it easier than handling them all at once, at least with the bulk of their staff. That way they'll get, theoretically, the proper attention. Whether or not they get the time each of those needs to come out and be good, that's in question. It also means that this Mass Effect game is not going to come out for a long time. Now, if this Mass Effect game comes out within the next 3 years, the answer is yes. I would be worried about the quality of all those games. Also from the Kaiser, or Caesar if you prefer. He says, we see a bunch of staff, specifically writers from the original trilogy coming back. Should they give new talent a chance to shine, or just QA the hell out of their work? Are they right to bring back the OG writers? I think a mix of stuff is always best. Depends on the talent. I don't know exactly who wrote what, but you want new ideas and you want experience with this established franchise. New ideas are probably necessary no matter what, but that doesn't hurt. There is a team of writers doing everything on this. Rad Thesis wants to know about Mac Walter's role. He was the creative director of the entire Mass Effect franchise. up until about a year ago, and now is simply the project director for the remaster team. What's next for him? I would love to answer this question with intelligence. I don't have any inside information on this one in particular. My guess is that he's moving from more of a creative role to an administrative role. That is a total guess, though. Also from Rad Thesis, will the next Mass Effect have a multiplayer mode like Anthem, where 2 or more friends can complete story missions together, or solo if they prefer? He believes that Casey or Mike hinted in an interview 2 years ago about the potential for this direction, and I remember that too. That is a good question. He asked that again, is that something I'd like to see? The answer is both yes and no. I would like to see the traditional Mass Effect experience, single player, and then an additional mode with an expanded multiplayer that includes story missions. There's a lot that can go with that. I want to make a video about this. I don't know how many people would be interested in it, but since you are the third person to ask me that, I think it's going to come. So we'll take a look at that subject in detail just for the 3 of us, if that's all who's interested. I really like the Mass Effect multiplayer. Changing gears a little bit, Stone Cold 10X wants to know my thoughts on the original trilogy finally being remastered. I think that is the best option for moving the franchise forward. It's a very obvious move. It's probably a cost-effective move. It's likely to have the effect of re-energizing the franchise, coming in for a new game. It's a good thing. Obviously, this depends on the quality, but that is the move to make, and they made it, and that's positive. Bro Vicarian asks, what are you expecting from the Legendary Edition? Not a ton. I'm expecting the exact same 3 games, exactly as they are, with probably better animations, hopefully better animations, and better textures, and obviously a higher resolution and higher frame rate, and that is it. Some follow-up questions. Leonardo da Vinci asks, do you think the remastered Mass Effect 3 will have multiplayer, and if so, will it include the verticality of Andromeda? I really hope it has multiplayer. There has been no indication of that. I can't get a yes or no answer from the people at BioWare. Will it include the verticality of Andromeda? It would not be Mass Effect 3 multiplayer at that point. It would be something else. I would look for that verticality of Andromeda to come in the multiplayer in the next Mass Effect game, whenever that comes out. Hockey Trent 1995 asks, do you think it's possible the remaster has a new ending? Yes, it is possible. I do not think it's likely based on what they're doing. It would be a very, very, very bold move to do that, and it could pay off. Is the franchise in a position to take a very, very, very bold move? I guess that's a matter of opinion. I think that's more likely to backfire than succeed at this point, and it looks like they're going for a more conservative approach. So it's possible, but unlikely. Adrian asks, for each major decision in Mass Effect, what is your canon or canon decisions? Example, is Rex alive or dead? This is very difficult because I've played these games many, many times, and all those playthroughs start to bleed together at this point, but let's give it a try. If I can, everyone who survives is alive. Rex, Rachni Queen, Mass Effect 2 squad mates, Mass Effect 2 crew. I chose Ashley in the first game as a romance, and I am loyal. So if I get to pick one, I'll stick with her all the way through. I'm not saying she's the best romance option, but I am loyal in that way. I denied Cerberus at the end of Mass Effect 2, not for the reasons that Shepard ended up gaming. I thought it was pretty obvious that Reaper technology was unstable and no one could control it and no one should have it. Then I cured the Genophage, saved both the Geth and Quarians, and then I guess killed all the Geth by using the destroy option. The destroy option was the ending that I least disliked, to put it that way. Upside Down Boy wants to know, who are you going to bang in the next Mass Effect? This greatly depends upon who the playable character is, because, as I just said in the previous version of this, I'm loyal. It's unlikely that Ashley will be in this new game simply because of that first choice in the original Mass Effect game, so I think ultimately the answer is everybody. That's creepy. Mike wants me to put together a Mass Effect alien tier list. We'll bang, okay? I'm assuming he means which alien race I want to bang in what order. This gets weird really, really quick, but I decided to answer the question anyway. Anyway, human first, That's because I'm a human and I like human girls, weirdly enough. Then Asari. Then there's a very big gap, and that's a personal preference. I am totally cool with you guys wanting to bang whoever you want to bang, but let's go to that gap. Let's say Quarian, Angara. Now this gets weird. Hanar. This is kind of too high for Hanar to be on this list, but that's kind of freaky. Solarian, Turian, then Geth, I guess? That's a robot that's more than halfway up the list. Drell, then Prothean. And then the next tier, this is when it starts to get really disgusting. Batarian, Collector, Vorcha. Oh my god, that sounds awful. Oh, there's scratch marks on that one. Ket, Rachni. Oof. Then we'll go with the bangs that will probably result in your death. Elcor, Krogan, you're not surviving that. Yogg, you're not surviving that. Volus, they wouldn't survive that, and potentially you wouldn't survive that. The atmosphere is different. Then Leviathan and Reaper, those dudes are kilometers tall. That's ridiculous. The one important thing that you need to know is the race needs to be capable of calculus. Otherwise, I'm not interested at all. Can the Vorcha do this? I don't know. Probably because they ended up getting off their home world, but that was kind of unpleasant. Rack Jumper wants to know, best girl? Question mark. With a name like Rack Jumper, I assume he means highly sexual. That's not the answer I'm going to give. I think the most well-rounded female character is Tali. And from an emotional standpoint, she is the most interesting. From a bang standpoint, I'm afraid I would kill a Quarian. That's why they're not as high up on my list. But that is actually made fun of by Quarian characters in the game. I'll let you go with that. This one's from Yanis Prospero. What are your feelings on the original ending of Mass Effect 3? And if you didn't like them, do you feel the extended cut improved the endings to an extent to which you would call them good? I did not like the endings of Mass Effect 3, and the extended cut did help quite a bit, because the biggest problem with the endings of Mass Effect 3 is that they ended like that, and there was no explanation of where things went, and it led to crazy conspiracy theories that have a lot of weight. But as far as calling them good, I played Mass Effect going through it trying to get the best possible ending, and I believe that didn't exist, so I ended up disappointed. I was disappointed with all the potential options. The Destroy obviously wrecks the one thing that holds the Mass Effect universe together in destroying the mass relays. It also kills off the Geth, which is a huge bummer. Control doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I wouldn't trust those Reapers. And if I did use Control, I would send all Reaper forces directly into the nearest sun. Maybe that's the right ending. Synthesis is bizarre and sounds like something that you would fight to the death to avoid. So I wouldn't call any of these good. I understand why they went with 3 different choices that would force the player to choose something different for each one. But I think a lot of people played the game to try to get as many people to survive, to try to get the universe to survive in exactly the way it was, because it was such a fantastic universe. And since you couldn't do that, it ended up being disappointing. Rydar wants to know, following the Synthesis ending, would all sorts of husks be able to reintegrate into society? This is where Synthesis gets weird. The answer to that question directly is yes. They would probably have increased intelligence and unity and independence. The thought of having a bunch of other aliens or robots or thoughts in my head is very unappealing, but I believe looks in the Synthesis ending would become irrelevant. Physical forms might even become irrelevant, and there might be some weird, bizarre utopia. That depends all on your opinion, and like I said, I wouldn't want to live in it, so I guess utopia is not the right word. Boris15 wants to know, how many short video clips do you have of all the conversations in Mass Effect, and how much storage space do they take up? It's a lot. I don't even have all of them. I stopped about halfway through Mass Effect 3 because I had too many. Currently, I have 380 individual quotes. I probably have more than that spread out. That doesn't take up that much room because they're all very short. That's 3 gigabytes. As far as just general clips, and these are clips that are 15 to 30 seconds, that takes up 54.6 gigabytes. There's about 5 to 6 hours of video. In total, all of my Mass Effect recordings, and a lot of this is redundant, is all the way up to 2.6 terabytes, which surprised me. In that case, there are probably multiples in different sizes and different lengths, so I can go in there and move them into the videos easily. Interestingly enough, I'm going to redo all these with a remaster, so those numbers will change. I'm going to try to get complete ones too. Joe K points out that we get a lot of military and mercenary in Mass Effect, but not a lot of regular civilian life. So the question there is, what do I think the civilian life is like in the Milky Way? And the answer to that is way too broad to give something specific. If you think of all the potential lives on Earth, just Earth, right now, that would take forever. They're incredibly diverse, a lot of backgrounds, a lot of cultures. Now take that and expand it over the entire galaxy. At least 50 planets like that. Cultures that are way, way different. Probably way more than 50 planets. So the answer to that question is civilian life could be whatever you want it to be if you got the cash, I guess. You'll get some very, very poor people that are worse off than the worst on the Earth. You can get some very, very rich people that are richer than God and can do whatever they want, and everything in between. From Jacob Bran Flakes and Ham. Personally, I'd love to see a prequel game set in the First Contact War or something like that. It would open up opportunities for the original cast to return, while avoiding the mess that was the Mass Effect 3 endings. Your thoughts? If I was in charge of the Mass Effect universe and had to choose where it goes moving forward, I would agree with you. I would personally set a game in between Mass Effects 1 and 2 and have it be separate from the trilogy and have it match up with the entire trilogy without needing a canonical ending. The First Contact War is a little bit iffy because there was not a lot to the First Contact War. You could expand that, you could say this stuff was untold in the lore and go there. But I should also add that if I were in charge of the Mass Effect universe, I would recreate it in a spiritual successor type series that's not Mass Effect, but has all the elements that Mass Effect has. I think that would be the direction I'd go in. But they insist on making another game. I totally understand why they're not going with a prequel. It makes sense to me, especially from a business standpoint. But like I said, if I were doing things, I would do it different. I also think I'd make less money than they're going to make. So maybe that's why they're not doing that. From Alex. Is there a particularly interesting aspect of the Mass Effect galaxy that you think gets underrated by the community? A conflict, region, race, event, etc. that we don't talk enough about? I think Mass Effect fans do a great job of appreciating lots and lots of aspects. If you ask someone to list their top 5 favorite things about the Mass Effect universe, you will cover a lot of things. Perhaps an underrated aspect is the way that they perceive space and time and how long it takes to go from place to place. In the lore, over 99% of the Milky Way has not been explored. You can't get to it, it's too far away, you don't have the technology to get there, and that makes a lot of sense to me from a technological standpoint. Matches up very, very well with science fiction, and I love that about the Mass Effect universe. I got a few questions on mods. Eric00 Meat Plays and Horseman46 all want to know about mods and how the Legendary Edition might stack up. Unfortunately, I am the wrong person to ask about this. The way I participate in the modding community is watching videos. I don't actually install the games and play them through, and I actually had to look up and watch a bunch of the Nexus mods and stuff to understand how it might match up. I think there's some really, really, really talented people out there, and some of these will stack up pretty well. It's difficult to tell how this remaster is going to go because we haven't seen any of it. I would think, because they have more people working on it, that just from a financial backing and personnel and labor situation, they'll be able to create better stuff. Now, that doesn't actually mean it'll be there, but that would be my guess. As far as mods go, I'm just not the right person to ask. When I follow mods, and I do like mods, but I usually just look up weird stuff. Not the textures, not the improvement of stuff. I don't fully understand how that works. I might be the least competent technical person that does science stuff on YouTube. I'm not bragging. That's bad. Sorry, I can't answer that question better. From Purple Heart. What were your initial thoughts of Mass Effect Andromeda compared to now? I get asked this a lot. I get asked for an objective look at Mass Effect Andromeda, and it's almost impossible for me to give an objective look at Mass Effect Andromeda. I did learn a lot of things while covering the game, the biggest of which is I was blown away that people wouldn't just play and enjoy the game for what it was, that they were more interested in being angry about what they got than enjoying the good gameplay, enjoying jumping around. There were issues with the gameplay going forward, but on the easier settings, it was very, very enjoyable. And I just couldn't believe that people couldn't just sit there and enjoy the game. Now, still, you can look at it as objectively as possible and point out some very, very serious issues with it. There were a couple things that stuck out in Mass Effect Andromeda that still stick with me now. The first is all the unanswered questions. The thing I like most about Mass Effect is answering why things happen, and Mass Effect Andromeda didn't do that. So it left the ending of that first game feel particularly hollow. It also lacked the twists and turns of the original Mass Effect, and that's what made the series great. And so, from a standing straight-up comparison, and there is no way to separate Mass Effect Andromeda from the Mass Effect trilogy, it doesn't have a favorable comparison, especially based on what most people played the Mass Effect series for. Now, if Mass Effect Andromeda was called something else entirely, like Andromeda Squad, or just not have the Mass Effect branding on it, I think the game would have done a lot better. I think it would have been perceived better, but that's not the direction they went. They went with the Mass Effect brand, and it gets an unfair comparison to one of the best video game series of all time. But it's also fair to point out that the reason it gets that potentially unfair comparison is that the game is not on the level of the original trilogy. But how many games are on the level of the original trilogy? Especially the first couple games. Kitty asks, do you want to see an eventual sequel to Mass Effect Andromeda, or do you think they should move on to something new? Personally, I enjoyed Andromeda and thought it had potential, though it definitely had its flaws. There's a big issue with moving forward to a sequel to Andromeda, since we know they're not doing that, or at least not doing that directly. They're going to be in the Milky Way. If this next Mass Effect game is successful, they should focus all of their efforts on continuing that. Going back to Andromeda, which people did like, but a lot of people didn't like, but more importantly, the perception of it was so negative that if you get something positive going, you have to stick with it. So, do I want to see one? Kind of. Do I not want to see one? Would I prefer them to do something else? They kind of have to do that. I would love to get some of the answers of Mass Effect Andromeda answered, because none of them were, but I think they'll have to do that in a book, or a comic, or a slight DLC, or conversations, or potentially further down the line bring some stuff back. Unfortunately for the people who loved Andromeda, all those things that they were interested in, all the mysteries, I don't think they'll ever get solved. That's a bummer. But one more thing I also think is I don't think they actually had the answers to any of those questions, and that's a problem. Okay, we're going to move to channel questions now. They're still somewhat Mass Effect related, but the full-on Mass Effect discussion part of this extremely long video is now come to a close. These are more specific to me. Start with Avi P. What happened? Question mark. LOL. I'm assuming you mean what happened with the channel, because I went from making a lot of content to completely disappearing without really saying anything or backing it up, which I regret to a degree, but in the situation I was in, I kind of understand why I just faded away. As many of you know, Mass Effect Andromeda was not perceived well overall. There was a lot of negativity with it, and a lot of people were frustrated and had nowhere to go with their frustrations, so a lot of people went to all the Mass Effect YouTubers, and we were bombarded with negativity, and it really, really added up and completely changed my attitude from going from some of my best and favorite moments in video gaming and talking about video games and that kind of stuff to within several weeks being completely worn out and really kind of miserable and that kind of stuff. So I just decided to fade away. And I actually went through a period of about 10 to 12 months where I didn't play any video games. They had lost all appeal, which in retrospect and as I was going back there blows me away, because video games, have always been such a huge part of all the entertainment I do. And the fact that I was that down on the video game scene and the negativity related to that kind of, I think, is the explanation of what happened. I hope that I have the proper attitude to start doing videos again. I really needed to look at, you can get 100 positive comments and maybe 3 negative comments, and those 3 ones stick with you like no other. And there are people who are really, really good at ignoring that, and I am not one of those people. That leads into a question from Bo. Will you be going back to uploading regular videos once again? And if you do so, will you be branching away from BioWare? The answer is yes, I will be doing regular videos once again, and by that, I don't mean the podcasts. I am fully aware that those podcasts are bizarre, and not everyone's into them. I mean the actual, highly structured, regular videos. They will be coming out less frequently than I did before. At this point, I'm just doing it to have something to do and to have fun. It'll be kind of a completely different attitude. And if those videos become very popular again, or as the next Mass Effect game approaches, ramp that up. Anytime there's a new trailer, I'll probably cover that. I do not expect a new trailer for at least a year, maybe more. The earliest one could possibly come out, I guess, is in the summer. I don't expect regular news, or at least important news, for a while. So I won't be doing things unless I really have something to say. I have goals as far as what kind of content and the frequency of that content, and they come in a bunch of different tiers, and I'm not sure which ones I'm going to hit. The most important thing to look at while remaking these channels is I was not ready to get started again. I feel like the people at BioWare jumped the gun on me. I wasn't expecting anything to start coming out until after the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. So I wasn't ready to go. I don't have the hardware I want, audio and video that I want, and so I'm going to get started again slowly. Eventually, I might get back to what I used to do, but it's going to take a while, and at this point, there isn't really stuff out, so I won't be able to anyway. As far as the frequency of stuff, it's going to largely depend on the interest, and that will come from just raw numbers and stuff. If a lot of people are really, really interested, I'll be more encouraged to keep on making more content. I will have to come in here with a completely different attitude. We'll talk about that in a little bit. How about lore videos? DRD Productions, Jordan, Unofficial AI, Brian, Sploosh, Frank Sinatra, The Fourth, all want to know about the lore videos. The lore videos are the most popular videos I do. I'm fully aware of that. I both want to and don't want to get into more lore videos. I think ultimately I will because the interest is so high. One thing you should know about lore videos is they take at least twice as long as anything else I do. They're exhausting. They're very, very difficult, and I become, I suppose, way too anal about the content. I think what comes out is good, but they're very, very difficult and taxing. There are more things I can do. Certainly going over all the races, that's something to do. There's more things that the Mass Effect universe has lots and lots of things to go after. But as far as what I like doing, the lore videos aren't that high up there. As far as what people like watching, they're way up there. So we'll have to see. I think eventually, depending on the interest, and the interest certainly seems to be there, we'll get some lore videos, but this is going to take a while. Certainly going to have to wait till after I get all the footage from the remaster. I want new footage. I want 4K footage. I want updated textures. I don't like the way my video recordings look like. All my video recordings are from the PlayStation 3 on the original trilogy. It doesn't look good at all. It really bothers me. So that is not going to come out at the earliest. I gotta think June, July. There's a set of videos I want to do first for sure. Anyway, if people keep on asking for them, eventually, yeah, I imagine I'll get some out there. But something that sticks with me particularly about the lore videos, someone, and it was a very flattering comment, they said, I want you to do lore videos every day. And I panicked because the lore videos take at least 30 hours, 30, 40 hours. It's impossible to do it every day. And it's just kind of taxing. If you're patient and allow me to get the stuff out, I think we'll be able to get some. But we'll have to see exactly where the popularity of this channel comes first. The videos I like doing speculation videos, question videos, news videos, trailer breakdowns. Those are the things I like doing most, and so those will take priority. Depending on time and interest, like I said, more lore videos will come out. Logan wants to know, any thoughts on doing more lore-related content that does not pertain to Mass Effect, i.e. Dragon Age, Star Wars? There is almost no chance I do this. I have a special connection with the Mass Effect series that I don't share with any other game stuff. There are some book series that I'm almost as knowledgeable as Mass Effect on, but I don't see myself branching out. It would be a successful way to run a channel. I'm not particularly concerned about running a profitable channel or anything like that. I'm going to be doing this for fun, at least to start off there, but I'm going to focus on Mass Effect for as long as it runs, and probably not split off from there. And if I do split off, it probably won't be video game related, but that's way into the future. From Toby, are you going to put up gameplay Let's Plays of the new Mass Effect or Mass Effect Legendary Edition? The answer to this is almost certainly no. There is one qualifier. I like to make videos that I would like to watch, and I don't generally like watching Let's Plays because I would rather play the game myself. I found out, and I was originally planning on trying some of this stuff, but what I discovered while doing this channel is that video games and playing video games is a very personal experience to me, and I like to go in there and just kind of relax my head and dive into a different world, and that's not something that is possible to do with Let's Plays. You play the game differently, you kind of open up to the community. It's very different. There are also people who are very, very good at doing those things. It is an easier way to make content, but it's not necessarily the content I like to do. It's certainly not challenging in a way that the other videos are, so I will not be going into those kinds of things. There might be exceptions to that, but one thing that's important to me is I have to continue enjoying video games in order for this channel to work, and I don't think I would enjoy doing those. That is a guess, but that's the way it seemed to work out. Manitoba goes on, they recognized your relevance before. Are you getting in contact with BioWare to aid content creation with a site visit or early sneak peeks? They did get to me before. I was actually quite far down on their priority list, but more importantly, the contacts I had at Electronic Arts are no longer at Electronic Arts. The people I contacted aren't with BioWare anymore. I have no contacts. It was a very bizarre experience covering Andromeda early. It was fun. They had an insistence on putting a sponsored by EA tag, which kind of undercut everything I did. So I just kind of wonder, should I do that again? It's probably worth it, right? I don't even know if my site will get popular enough to get that kind of invite. It certainly won't do that for the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Archangel Phoenix. I'm assuming that the Mass Effect Remaster will have some form of multiplayer. Will you do a multiplayer event with viewers like you did for Andromeda? I remember playing with a bunch of us, and that was rather fun. I do remember playing with you guys. That was a bunch of fun. I don't think this new edition is going to have a multiplayer, at least the remaster. That is a huge bummer. Huge, huge bummer. If it does, the answer is yes. In fact, that is the one version of Let's Play that might end up on the channel, is doing a multiplayer event, but I'm not expecting them to. And finally, can you do some basic Mass Effect world lore recap before the Legendary Edition? Just info about what the state of the galaxy is before Mass Effect 1 starts. I was already thinking about doing something like that, and a general lore guide of pre-Mass Effect 1 stuff does sound interesting. I'm going to give this a try. We're going to see exactly how much time I have to do all the videos I want to do, but if something like that does come out, it'll come out maybe a week or two before the Mass Effect Legendary Edition comes out. So I guess the answer is yeah. Nexus Smile wants to know, what will you do when Tucker comes storming out of dark space? Panic. Panic? Bad panic, knowing that Tucker has Reaper-like abilities. That sounds like an absolute disaster. I guess I would go with the destroy option. There's really no other option. You can't control him. That's not possible. And synthesis just sounds like torture. So, destroy, is that an option? Build a weird, crazy space station and destroy. Will you help me with that? Union, finally, and we'll wrap this up, wants to know, what is your excitement level, 1 or 2? It's higher than 1, so 2. Yeah, the answer is definitely 2. Very descriptive answer. Anyway, if you're still here, wow, thanks guys. This was an experimental video. I want to keep in contact with people. but also in taking a look at why my channel failed the first time around, it was diving too much with community interaction. So I need to find a way to stay engaged with the people who really like my channel and want to talk with me, but not dive into the comment section where I don't have the mental fortitude to deal with negativity, which is not good, but that's the internet, isn't it? I mean, it's just the 1 or 2 comments that really stick with you. So if these were entertaining, let me know. If this was too long, let me know. I want to do these in the future, and I will be staying out of the comment sections except for these particular videos. So you can ask me a question and I can actually respond to it. I am also fairly responsive on Twitter if you @ me. At some point, if the channel does become popular in the way it was again, I won't be able to get to everybody. Like I said, I don't know how long this video is going to end up being. It's really, really long. It's way longer than I was expecting, but hopefully entertaining enough. Anyway, let me know, and thanks for listening. And for now...
Humans talk too much.